Just a little delay there. I apologize. And Nikki, I am recording.
Okay,
You are
great.
live, so this meeting is yours.
Right.
I'm here if you need me.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Town of Situate Committee for Equity and Justice for All to order. Today is January 26, 2021, and the time now is 6:33 p.m. I'd first like to read the declaration from Governor Baker on meetings during a pandemic. In response to Governor Baker's declaration of public health emergency and the related emergency executive order dated March 12, 2020, Town of Situate public meetings shall meet remotely until further notice. This meeting will be recorded by Situate Community Television and can be viewed live on Situate Community Television Facebook Live. The recorded meeting will be available the following day on Comcast Channel 9 and YouTube Situate Community Television. Okay, and with that, is there a motion to call the meeting to order?
So moved.
Second that.
Okay, so Ms. Stewart moves, and who was the second?
Angela?
Angela was the second. All right, let's take a vote. Ms. Dre. So the vote is to start the meeting or not. So if you would like to start the meeting, you say yes or aye. If you would not like to start the meeting, you'd say no or nay.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Richa.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Yassin. Ms. Yassin, you are muted.
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Secor,
Yes.
and Ms. Harriman. You're muted, Ms. Harriman.
Oh, okay. It wouldn't allow me to unmute myself initially, but now it does. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I apologize, Ms. Harriman. That was my fault. You are now a co-host. You have that ability to do.
Oh, no worries.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we are all set. I'd like to start the meeting with something called a tribal land acknowledgement. This is something that I saw on the Stride Facebook page. Land acknowledgements are a simple, powerful way to show respect to the original inhabitants of the land where you're currently standing, presenting, about to engage in an activity, etc. The Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness believes that this is a meaningful step towards honoring the truth, making the invisible visible, and correcting the American stories that erase Indigenous peoples' tribal history and culture. Land acknowledgements demonstrate a commitment, counter the doctrine of discovery, and to undo the ongoing legacy of settler colonialism and the genocide of Indigenous people. The mission statement of the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness is thus: our mission is to preserve Native American cultural traditions, to assist Native American residents' basic needs and educational expenses, to advance public knowledge and understanding that helps dispel inaccurate information about Native Americans, and to work towards racial equality by addressing inequities across the region. The original inhabitants of this land were Wampanoag. So today I direct your attention to the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness. I will be opening every meeting with the tribal land acknowledgement and take us all on a short journey at the beginning of every meeting to learn about the native people of this land and to remind us that most of us are not originally from here. Okay, with that, I'd like to open up some conversations about creating safe spaces and norms for language during our meetings. I consider this an ongoing project, but I have had some input from some committee members prior to this meeting, so I'd like to share just a few comments and that with you, and then I'll open it up to the committee for any comments beyond that. This is a safe space for people of color. Any comments that are inappropriate and have an animus in racism or bias will not be allowed. Okay, we will turn off your sound if your contributions to the meeting are offensive in any way. I received a list of suggested norms from Miss Richa. Thank you. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
It's Risha. It's okay.
Risha, thank you. And I'll just read what she sent to me and we can have a discussion about what we feel our norms are very briefly, and then we'll continue at our next meeting. So number one, this is a safe space where people can bring up challenges and questions without fear of repercussion or hostility. Number two, take the learning but leave the story so that people feel comfortable sharing their experiences. Number three, assume best intentions. All participants are embarking on this journey at different starting points. And then listen/read and be kind. Also, use respectful language. Ask when you are unsure. And again, administrators have permission to remove anyone with inappropriate content or acting inappropriately. I would like the committee members to think about these as we begin our discussion about goals tonight and contribute any remarks they think might be helpful as we move towards a statement about norms and a creation of safe space. So that being said, is there anyone who would like to contribute to that list or change it or anything at all? We'll take a few minutes for this.
No, I appreciate sharing that. I think it's always good to, to state what, norms and language like that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Is there anyone else? Okay. All right, so I'd like us to continue thinking about this. And there is a statement that Ms. Yassine brought to my attention about the Disability Committee, and they kind of have a statement that they use with all of their meetings. So I'd ask the committee members when they have a moment to take a look at that. But I think it's clear that we're going to be appropriate at these meetings and stay on task. So we'll be very focused when we open the meeting up to community members. Okay, next on the list is the acceptance of the minutes. We will discuss the approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes that anyone would like to make or discuss? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I motion that we approve the minutes.
Wonderful.
And I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Dre. Thank you, Ms. Harriman. Okay, minutes will be approved. Thank you, Maura Curran, for taking minutes at our last meeting. All right, let's get into some.
Unfortunately, we need a roll call vote, I believe, for this.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Okay, let us begin the roll call vote. It's going to go down the line. Ms. Dre,
Yes.
Ms. Harriman,
Yes.
Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Secor,
Yes, with one minor change, and that's just the spelling of my last name.
okay, so what is
Saw
the,
that. I'll update it.
okay,
It's-
great.
I've seen worse.
I apologize.
It's quite all right. No
Yeah,
offense- No
Awanika,
offense taken. No offense
Yeah.
taken.
Awanika has been butchered many.
I can't even imagine that.
Oh, boy. All right, we're doing well.
And Ms. Sanders, would you please also vote?
Oh, yes, my
Thank
vote
you.
is yes.
You have to remember to vote yourself.
I do have to remember. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I just want to also, I'll make that correction and send it over to Ruth, but I also want to, whenever we share documents in our meeting, I also have to send that, and they kind of have to be appended with it and posted together. So that document that we reviewed at our first meeting will also need to go on record, just as you move forward. Keep
okay,
that in mind.
that in mind, thank you.
Can
All
I
right,
add something quickly?
Yes.
Sorry. Since
Yes.
we're being so formal with the Miss Sanders and everything, I'm technically Reverend Stewart.
okay, great,
Just
thank
if we're-
you.
Thank
If
you.
we're
I
being
really had
formal-
wanted to review that. Is the appropriate, what would you like to be? And I'd love to know from all of you, what you would like to be your appropriate, I don't know the right word for that,
Title,
title. Yes, thank you.
yes.
So Angela, are you, again, and especially these hyphenated last names, I need to know, do I have all of it? What do you want to be? So if we could go through,
Ms. Dre's fine.
okay? Kim,
Miss-
you are,
I mean, if we are doing the formalities, it's fine as is. I prefer being referred to by my first name, but whatever is appropriate meeting conduct.
I feel awkward when I'm typing it up if I have some as first names and some as,
Sure.
I don't feel as respectful then, so I want to be it one way or the other.
Then I certainly don't want to make any assumptions for the rest of the group about first names. So I'm fine with whatever. I'm going to be Switzerland in this.
And
Miss-
I think Ruth just means when she's typing the minutes, Kim,
For the
not
minutes.
as we
Right.
talk through one
Right,
another.
it's,
Oh,
Yes.
okay. I see. Okay.
are you
So,
Ms. Dr.?
I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I'm sorry. I think I'm
okay.
not fully here. Ms. is fine.
Ms.
And
Harriman.
Kelly Harriman or Harriman?
Harriman is my official last name. I just use I use Kelly, but it's not hyphenated. So Harriman is fine.
Okay. Celia?
It's Miss Risha.
Okay, Nikki, are you?
I am Madam Chair. That's what Maura just called.
Got it.
I'm following what Maura says.
Tom?
I'm following Maura's lead.
Well, I'm either Mr. or Mr. Vice Chair, but
Mr. Vice Chair, yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
okay.
Okay,
And so we'll go, we've got, for Natasha, it's Reverend Stewart.
yep. And Mr.
In this world of formality, I usually,
Okay.
like him, just go by Natasha.
Right,
So-
right, as well. And that's fine, but when I'm
Well,
typing it
we're
up,
being recorded, so this is
Yes.
fancy.
Yeah, so fancy, I'm Reverend. Natasha
Fancy,
Stewart.
yes. Okay.
Bob,
Missed the clock, I guess.
Maura,
Select person or,
Yeah, you might want to say select person current, or that's
Okay.
fine. Just for the written text, it's Maura when we're all chatting.
right,
right,
exactly. And Amanda, I'm assuming you're Lieutenant.
Lieutenant O'Shea.
Lieutenant O'Shea, but again, you know,
Right.
in this context, you could call me Mandy.
Right, it's just as I write things up. And then Lucia,
Ms. Silvera is fine.
Okay.
thank you guys. This is something I wanted to clarify. Okay,
Good.
ready to move.
All right. Let's get back into it. Okay. So I'm gonna ask Madam Secretary, Ruth, you didn't say how you wanted to.
Oh, sorry, I'm Ms. Yassine, it's fine.
Okay, Ms. Yassine, will you read the charge? Do you have?
I do have that. I thought
Okay.
someone did it, but I do have that. It's already in my minutes, ready
So
to
we're
go.
gonna, let me just say, we're gonna go into some immediate administration kind of organizational stuff, and then we'll get into some other things. We have a few presentations. But I wanna read the charge into the minutes this week, and so that everyone can hear who hasn't seen the charge, what we've been charged with. So please.
Okay, the charge is the establishment of an advisory committee, selectmen on equity and injustice for all, whose charge is 1, to review town policies, procedures, and budgets for the purpose of advancing equity and justice for all, with a focus on eradicating from the town of Situate oppression, racism, injustice, and violence against all people. 2, to report to the Board of Selectmen on the results of its work at least one time per calendar quarter. 3, and to make recommendations based on the results of such work for the consideration of the Board of Selectmen within 12 months from the date of appointment of a chair of the committee.
Nikki, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me at all?
Now we can.
Now I can.
Yes, so we have a chair and there's lots of work to do. Are there any questions, comments from the committee on charge?
Can you all hear Nikki? Because I cannot.
It's very faint.
Yeah, it's faint. All of a sudden it went faint.
Yeah.
Yeah, like now I can't hear her at all. She's
Can you hear me now?
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Very little.
not
No.
now.
Gone.
It'd be good when we can all get back into a room, won't it?
Can you?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, so many people I've seen now online that I've never actually met in person. It's odd.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's
That's
better,
better.
Nikki.
Okay, all right, let's go with that one. All right, so are there any comments on the charge? Okay, we'll keep going. If there are any suggestions or comments, feel free to contact me about them. All right, let's move on. The next discussion will be on the name of the committee. Is there a motion to discuss the name of the committee? Or what, let's have some conversation about it first, I guess.
Well, I think this is something that's been brought up by multiple people that I've spoken with. I know that people have had a hard time, just the whole mouthful. Advisory Committee on Equity and Justice for All does not flow off the tongue, even though it's wonderful thoughts. And I think one of the more common usages these days are diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a common nomenclature that's used across many different forums. It's easily abbreviated into DEI. And I think that it gives people a very good view of what we're going to be dealing with. So I think Maura had actually started it with us by referring to us as the Situate, I think, Committee for Equity and Justice for All. Sorry, Situate Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or just, so I think, okay, it was Situate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. last time, and I think that works really well. So other thoughts and comments from other people?
I think that works. Just keep it simple.
I
Totally
agree.
agree.
Yeah, and it
I
is
agree.
consistent with, it seems like that is the institutional language used pretty much everywhere at this point. I would agree too.
Okay, if that's the case, then we should,
Okay, are
Take
we
a
good
vote.
with Situate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee? That those exact words, Situate Diversity, Equity, because this is going to make a lot of work for a lot of people at Town Hall, so we should not do this again because we have to change our name. Oh, more, I believe we have to really actually apply to, if we vote this, what we're doing is going to the selectmen to ask them, if a select board, okay, select board, to ask if we can change our name. Is that correct? Because they are the ones who set this name.
Correct. And I don't really see a problem with it, but absolutely, and I'll just bring it up at the next, I'll put it on the agenda with Karen Canfield for the next meeting after you vote. Just has
Yeah.
to be official for the town clerk that everything matches.
Right. So again, are we good with Situate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee?
Or
Yes.
do we
does it,
want to just, do we want to just do equity and inclusion?
I think we have to say committees. Situate
Equity
Diversity,
and
Equity, and
Inclusion.
Inclusion is kind of,
So we want to stick with what, people are kind of, they understand what that means.
Yeah.
Okay,
so can we have a motion with the
Is there a
exact wording
motion?
that people want?
does it flow a little easier to say the committee for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or equity and inclusion, or to put committee at the end? I know it's probably getting into too much detail here, but
well, I understand what you're saying. It sounds good when you say it all out, but what people generally do is the acronym. So it's like DEI committee
I
versus,
see. Yep. Gotcha. Yep.
you know what I'm saying? So but I understand what you're saying. It sounds better when you say it all out that
Yeah.
way. So that's my,
The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, do we need the Situate or no?
yeah, I think we do. Because
think
there's
we
a lot
do.
of them now. Yeah.
That when you search, it'll come up better. Okay. So
Yep.
Situate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we need a motion.
Well,
moved.
there's a hand raised. Should we go there? I don't understand the
We don't
protocol.
have public comments yet.
Okay.
We will.
Yeah, there's not, we're not taking public comments until later in the,
Yeah.
is there,
Down.
I'll move.
okay,
I'll make a motion that we change our name to the Situate Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee.
is there a second?
Second.
Wonderful. All right, let's call the roll. Miss Harriman,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Yassin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor.
Yes.
Hold on, names are moving around here. I will say yes. And Miss Risha,
Yes.
Miss Dre.
Yes.
All right. So that passes, and we will forward that request on to you, Maura, and ask that you address it in your next meeting.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. All right. Does anyone, we're going to move on to meeting rules. So does anyone have any questions about making motions, seconding motions, opening meetings, any of that? Does anyone want to have a quick chat about that?
I think we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're figuring it out. I do have, I'm sorry.
I said you're doing a great job.
Oh, thanks. I have kind of a cheat sheet that I might circulate so that you can kind of have it beside you during the meeting. to kind of push things along, but we're moving pretty well. So that's good. Any other comments before we move on? Okay. All right, we're doing well. All right, next up, I'd like you, Ms. Dre, to talk a little bit about collecting information. So I had a conversation with Ms. Dre about all of the information that we're about to gather and analyze and review, and how to collect our findings and where. And I think you found out some information about that. So do you want to talk to us a little about that, Ms. Dre?
Sure. Let me pull up my email from Maura. But basically the gist of it, as we know, any communication has to be, formal, as far as if everyone on the committee is, we can't discuss anything unless it's in an open meeting format. So what was decided, I think, is what Nikki and I talked about is, rather than sending documents, let me get my train of thought here. I wasn't prepared, Nikki, to discuss this.
I'm sorry, I should have told you. It's just because we discussed it. So here's what I have. So
well, no, I can catch everyone up. What I think the best thing to do is, because of our limitations and because we have to abide by the open meeting rules, we can't have any document that we're communicating with not be public. So what I thought would be helpful for the committee is to have a central location for the various projects or tasks that we have going on, because I'm just a visual person and I like to look at a timeline or look at a project plan and see what's still out there. So that's something that we can do, but it would be managed by one person. I can share it with the group. Any discussions that need to be had will be added to the agenda and formally communicated and documented. But I was just wondering, and Nikki and I were talking about what ways and what things we could do to just organize the different projects, because we have a lot on our plate. And again, I was just thinking for myself, where I personally, professionally, I work in an industry that everything is documented. And there's a lot of shared folders and shared documents. And ideally, if we could do something like that, I thought it would be nice, because people could look at their task and update accordingly, things that they have accomplished. But it would be best if one person managed that. And so I am willing to do that. So as we progress and we have specific a timeline or a task, because we do have, we have a quarterly report to provide to the board. So I think it would be best to have an idea of, okay, what are those things we want to have completed and be able to present to the board in the quarter's update.
Okay, so just to add to that, I would say what Ms. Dre is trying to say is that we can't put everything in, say, a Google Drive or Google document or a Google Sheet. Committee, we can send to someone, Ms. Dre's volunteered, any updates and she can add them to the folder. Also, in terms of meetings, this is something that I have been working through since our last meeting. So we have 6 members, voting members of the committee, okay? So that means that in order to have a meeting at any time, we need quorum, which would be 5, okay? That being said, I think that means that no more than 3 of us, is that right? Yes, no more than 3 of us can meet at any one time, right? So
Can I clarify, Nikki, that we have 7 voting members?
do we have 7 voting members?
Yes,
I'm
we
sorry.
do.
Okay.
Our voting members are Ms. Kelly Harriman, Ms. Dre, Ms. Risha, Ms. Sanders, Mr. Secor, Reverend Stewart, and Ms. Yassin.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
So
again,
then,
as select person, I'm working on these titles. As the
Right.
select person, Curran clarified us for in that memo also, we need, 3 or more. Do we need 3 or more for a quorum?
we need at least, I think,
Yeah, no, you want to back in off the 7. So if there's 7 voting members, a quorum would be 4, because that's the majority.
right,
So you need at least 4 to be present.
to have a meeting for where votes or policy is being decided.
Mhm.
And then,
And keep in mind that those are the voting members. So not that we find you non-voting members not important. You are very important. I think this is a wonderful input that we have to this committee, is to have the various resources on this committee, but still it is, it's just the voting versus non-voting.
Can I chime in? Sorry, I
yes,
don't want
please.
to. In the interest of inclusion and justice for all, I know we just switched the name, but I'm wondering, why wouldn't a committee member, specifically one that works in town hall, what was the conversation when you decided to make this this membership non-voting? Because I think it should be a voting position, specifically when a lot of issues may direct the employees directly, whether it's through policy, training, workload. And I don't know if I'm maybe going off topic, maybe if that's a discussion for another day, but I'm curious to know why, at least my role, why wouldn't that be a voting one?
You want me to take that?
Yes, please.
So Lucia, that's probably our misunderstandings. I thought our records indicated that you chose to be a non-voting member when the board interviewed you. Doesn't mean it can't change.
Okay.
So if that's your preference, I mean, certainly, absolutely, you can be a voting member. But I'll double check the notes too, and maybe I misspoke. But I thought I had recalled that you had chosen just to be a non-voting, but not an issue if you want to change that.
Okay, I thought it was just, that's what it was, but I think it's important to have a town employee voice that is a voting one, I think.
I'm going to look at the charge again, 1 sec.
And that was not set, my memory is that was set at a select board meeting when this was when people were deciding who was what, and it may have even been decided before the town employee was chosen. You might want to review the previous meeting notes. I'm not sure, Ms. Curran, which meeting that was.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Ruth. 1 sec, I'm just going to check the charge because it's written right in there.
Because this is not something that was decided by this committee. This was by the select board.
Correct.
Right.
Right, so if that were to change, it would have to be the select board to clarify or change that. And that would also change our quorum and the number of people. Does it also change the number of people that can meet at any one time?
And I know they were also very concerned about having an even number. They liked an uneven number because then you don't end up with a tie.
I do recall that conversation.
Yep, so you are all correct. It is a non-voting member as by written in the charge.
Okay,
So we would, the board of selectmen would have to change that, Lucia.
Okay, I was just curious to know, I mean, as long as it, I get an understanding of that, like why it wouldn't be, that's fine. I don't want to add any work to it. I think if there's a need for a discussion later, we can have that. But I was just curious.
I'm happy to chat with you offline too, Lucia, about how to bring it up here. Maybe we could add that to future agenda items, Ms. Justine.
Well, the question becomes would you like to somebody make a motion now to take this back to the board to the select board?
Well, we need to have discussion on it as well, right?
Yep.
But we also have some other topics to get through. So I would like to push this to a future agenda item section, if you wouldn't mind doing that. But I would like to speak with you as well directly.
Okay,
Okay, wonderful.
thank you.
Yes, of course, thanks. Any other, let's see, any other comments about meeting with one another? Okay, the other thing that I wanted to clarify is that, so 3 of us, tell me if I'm right or wrong, 3 of us can meet together at any one time, but 3 of us can meet with someone else. So it doesn't have to only be 3 people. So for instance, Ruth, Tom, and I could meet with someone from Bob's office. But if we meet with someone from another committee that has voting members, we can't meet with any more people than they can have in one meeting at one time. Does that make sense?
I think I would need that one again.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I get it. No, I've been going over this. Okay, so 3 of us can meet together at any one time. That's okay.
Okay.
Then outside, you can meet also one-on-one. That's totally fine. So no more than 3 at any one time. All right. Then 3 of us can also meet with other people, right? And here it is. So long as, right, the number of people we're meeting with from a committee that also has voting members doesn't exceed their limit. So if they're
Okay.
only allowed 3 people and we're only allowed 3 people, there can't be any more than 6 at that meeting.
Okay, so whatever their limit is.
Whatever their limit is.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that mean otherwise we would have to have a joint meeting? Say there were going to be 4 of us and 4 of them, we'd have to call it a joint meeting and
We'd
make
have
it
to
an
call it a
official thing.
joint meeting and we'd have to meet publicly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Tricky, but I think we can get there. Any other questions? This is,
Yeah, I'd like to again confirm about the written materials. So for sure, I know we can disseminate written materials to the group. Obviously, you're going to get the agendas from me. You're going to get minutes from me. There may be times you want me to summarize some information and get that out to people, but it just can't be a back and forth kind of information. I know, like Angela was saying, we may gather stuff together and things sent in to one person that then is compiled together and sent back to all of us. Is that correct, Ms. Curran? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
okay. So it's okay for me to send you the town's organizational chart or a handout on Robert's rules. Don't reply all to say thank you. Do we got it? All right. So we're going to be talking about subcommittees a little later on in a few minutes, actually. And the open meeting law does not apply to working committees or subcommittees. So committees where the members are asked to do something for another committee, gather information, have a conversation with someone, those kind of subsidiary committees don't require aren't required to follow the open meeting law. So those committees or those working committees that are gathering information for us, they don't have to follow the open meeting law. Okay, that's going to be important in a little bit.
Can I go back?
Yes, go right ahead.
I want to ask Angela, and I think Nikki, you've been speaking to her as well. You know, as we like the cataloging of information and what we can do there and what we can't do there, right? Like, for example, Ruth has been working off of some Google documents. We shared agenda. We had a meeting last week to talk through that. I realize there's going to be a lot of documentation that is going to be created as part of this committee. And I would just like to better understand what our mechanisms are for doing that.
All right, so my understanding is, and here's an example. Tom and Ruth are assigned public safety as their group. They can go back and forth on, can you do this meeting? Can you meet with the fire? I'll meet with police, etc. Right? Once they have some information from that group that we need to discuss or that needs to be documented, saved, whatever, they would then, after we discussed it at our meeting, they could send something out saying, this is what we'll be discussing at our meeting to all the committee members. But they cannot, just the committee members, Tom and Ruth, cannot all then go in and start talking together on an email about what they sent. You can only talk about what was sent from Tom and Ruth inside the committee. That being said, Tom and Ruth can talk to one another about it, right? Tom can also talk to Kim, even though she's working with the Veteran Affairs. All right? Tom, Kim, and Ruth can all talk together because that's only 3 people, right? Tom, Kim, and Ruth can also talk to the Chief of Police and Lieutenant O'Shea, right? Tom, Kim, and Ruth can only talk to Select Person Curran and Select Person Canfield in any meeting, because I believe that's your limit. Is that right, Maura? That you can
No,
only be,
and any 2 board members at a time. Yep.
right, because they vote. Who's with me? Anyone?
Mhm.
It's a lot. It's a lot. That's why I brought it up, because there's going to be a
Clarify
lot.
then also, as far as the written materials, if something
Yep.
is submitted to a meeting,
Yep,
isn't that also then going to be submitted
in the minutes.
as like with our minutes or something? I'm not sure where to submit that, Maura, but I do have.
It would be
I
an
think you can just
attachment.
list it and it becomes part of the record, Ruth.
Yeah.
We'll double check with Lorraine how other boards do that.
Okay, thank you.
Also, once we talk about whatever Tom and Ruth have sent us in the meeting, and it's doctored or adjusted, and everyone says, yes, this is what we want as our reporting document, it then is sent to, let's say, we haven't decided, but it's sent to Angela, Ms. Dre, and she will place it in whatever our save all the documents location is. If we're like, we need to make a change to that report and we all need to vote on it, Angela can then send it to all of us and say, we'll be discussing this at the next meeting. You see?
Yeah, so Angela, we send it to Angela, she puts it somewhere. Can we all access that? Is it like a Dropbox, a SharePoint? You guys understand?
Yes, but you can't put any comments in the
Maura's
Dropbox.
shaking her head.
Only Angela has access to, moving things or adjusting things that have been voted on or whatever, but no one else can make any comments in the Dropbox. They solely can make their comments to one another based on the 3-person rule, etc.
But we can
Or,
see it.
but you can see it. Yes, you can see it.
That's fine. Okay. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? We can come back and forth with this too, because we want to get this right and we want this done the right way. So, if we need to put it back on another agenda meeting, let's add that to a future agenda meeting. Maybe we won't take as long, but we'll just review it one more time. So if you don't mind, Ruth, adding it to future agenda meeting, we'll just take a few minutes versus as much time as we took today. How's that sound?
Okay, so that's add written information about written info for
Yes.
another agenda meeting.
Collection of
Yeah.
collection of information, collection and storage of information, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, that's great.
Anyone else? Okay. Moving right along, good. All right, new business. The last time we met, Select Person Curran asked Lieutenant O'Shea about civil service requirements and hiring, and so she hopefully is ready to tell us a little bit about that tonight. Is that true? I think you might
True.
be. Hello, there you are.
Hi.
Hi.
I love public speaking, just so everybody knows. So I've been waiting for it to get to this point. So my heart's beating out of my chest, or if I misspeak. Okay,
You're
so
amongst friends. You're amongst friends. Remember that.
thank you. So I'm a little bit in the process of hiring, and I'm new to this role, so I had to do a little homework myself. So I'm just going to read a little bit from my notes. So Situate is a civil service town.
What does that mean? Sorry
So
to interrupt you.
So
Yeah.
we're one of 142 other towns that have adopted civil service. So that's the process that we use to hire police and fire. So there's a civil service exam that's given, and it's given every other year. And so they usually flip-flop. So 1 year's police, the next year's fire. That being said, some cities and towns have an age requirement, so they won't allow anyone over the age of 31 to take the test. Situate is not included in that. COVID has absolutely played a role in the test being given. Both police and fire have not had a test since 2019. So we're all kind of working off older lists. And so taking the civil service test. So when it's time to sign up, no one under 21 can take the test. And it's about $100. You go onto the mass.gov site. And then it's like 100, I know for police, it's 100 question test. It sounded like it was about the same for fire. So then a score is developed, and then a list is made. And so just like you just explained how things get like a little convoluted, the way the list comes down can also be a little convoluted. So once the list is established, the very first thing that happens is, and this is Chapter 31, Section 26, enables a child of a police officer or firefighter who's killed in the line of duty and who passes the required written, medical, and physical exam, they get statutory preference. So anywhere in the state, they go to the top of everyone's list. The next thing that happens is there's a layoff list. So if, say, the New Bedford has had layoffs in the past because they have a very large department. If they are laying people off, then those people go to the top of everyone's list, that they would get preference because they had been working in police and fire before. The next thing that happens, once those two groups have been hired, then it goes to residents. And so you get residential preference in the town that you live in. And then veterans who are disabled get preference over all the other residents. After veterans, disabled veterans, comes regular veterans. And so veterans are, per civil service, they have to have served 180 days of regular service and have an honorable discharge, or 90 days of active duty, one of those days, which is in wartime. The other little piece to this, and so we do in Situate, at least on the police side, not necessarily on the fire side, we have people work part-time, and then that gives us an opportunity to see, you know, whether they like the job and that it's a good fit for us. So we have what's called permanent intermittent officers. And so back in the day when I was hired, I was a permanent intermittent officer. I worked part-time for 5 years until an opening happened, and then was hired full-time. So say tomorrow in the town, we have an opening for 1 police officer and 1 firefighter. What would happen is we would contact civil service, and for every 1 position, they will give you 3 names. And so civil service then will send out notification to those top 3 people, however the list falls, and they are allotted a certain amount of time that they can come in and sign for the list. So signing for the list means that they have decided that they want to have an interview with the town. And so at the end of the period, if the top 3 people have not signed for the list, then it would move on. So then they would call for the next set of names on the list. Once police and fire were essentially the same in this. And so to be able to work for the town, you have to pass a query, which essentially means that you don't have any convicted felonies. We also conduct our own extensive background check as well as the fire department. I know that that's something, Bob, that you. Okay. So all this is said and done. You've decided, we offered you the job. Then you need to be able to pass a physical agilities test. And those are standardized. So those happen through the state. You have to pass a physical, a psychological, a drug screen. And then once you go, if you're picked to go to the police academy, there's another set of physical fitness standards that the Mass Police Training Council requires you to do. The fire academy, once you're hired and offered the job, is about 6 weeks. So that's just about 55 days from start to finish. The police academy is 5 months long, and then additional field training once you're back in the department, and that's about 8+ weeks. So currently a full-time academy is approximately 900 hours. And like I talked about before, the reserve intermittent, there's a special academy for that, and that's around 400 hours. Now, just recently, you've heard a lot about police reform, and so we're actively working out how, what the bridge is going to be between the people, the part-time people we have working now, and what certifications need to be made down the road. So it sounds like, this is ever evolving, but there'll be some kind of a bridge academy that, even though they've done their 400 hours, that they're going to be required to get up to speed with the 900. I think those are all my notes. I know it sounds a little crazy, and it really is kind of a rigorous process. It's not like an easy, so from start to finish, from the time that you take a police or fire exam to the time that there is actually an opening, it could be years before like the process is finished. So any questions?
Well, one other thing I'd add is specific to, particularly to the fire department, in addition to the sort of priority that Situate residents are given in terms of the civil service list, the other requirement upon hire is that they live within a certain distance of the town. And civil service requirement, I believe, is 10 miles, although that can be, the town has the ability to negotiate a different standard with the union. So with the fire union, I know we've negotiated a distance, a residency distance of 15 miles. And the primary reason we do that is for callback. So we're often, particularly with the fire department, we have to staff up to a certain level, and in order and if we have if both of our ambulances, for instance, leave town for a period of time, we actually have to call firefighters back to be in the station to have staffed up to a certain level. And if we end up having firefighters who live beyond that 15 miles, the likelihood of getting them to come back on a callback call becomes minimal the further out they live. So ultimately that creates a lot of additional sort of strain on our ability to recruit. The other thing is that the town of Situate, at this point, particularly with firefighters, we really only hire paramedics. We're running 2 ambulances at any time. And when they do the civil service list with the fire department, this is one way, it's a little bit different than the police department. What the fire department does is when the police chief calls for a list from civil service, he'll have to specify what certifications he's looking for. So for the most part, the town of Situate only calls for paramedics. They can call for like an EMT basic, it would be a different list of civil service lists. So what happens is, for the most part, we're hiring just paramedics. The reality is virtually all towns, virtually all firehouses are doing the same thing. Almost all towns are looking for only paramedics. So what happens is once someone is a paramedic and they hit that list, you know, as soon as the list comes out, they have 5, 6, 7 towns vying for them. So it's been a constant struggle, to be honest with you, trying to keep our firefighter positions fully staffed, primarily because of some of the restrictions that have been placed by civil service. But you know, those are sort of the rules of the game. So that's you know, we do the best we can with what we have.
Can I ask a question? You said Situate adopted civil service. Did it not have it before, or how were police and fire hired before? What towns don't use civil service? So I guess I'm just trying to understand. I thought everyone would, it would all fall under civil service.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if you know, Mandy, how long we've had civil service. It certainly far predates me, but you know.
I mean, I've only known us to have civil service. And so I've been here for 17 years and, you know, I want to say that when just doing my research, it seemed like it was first developed in the 70s. So I would guess that's probably when most towns adopted it. It sounds like it kind of took away the opportunity for someone to give someone a job just because they knew them. It kind of is the fairest process. Like it takes out really who you are and just kind of has that like anonymity. You just take the test, and those who do well, you know, have a higher score than, you know, someone who wouldn't. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bit of a blind process where there's certainly a far greater degree of equity and fairness in the process, but it's also, you know, somewhat cumbersome and bureaucratic process. And so it just limits your ability to just like, you know, quickly recruit and refill positions. And it honestly, it even limits your ability to look at affirmative action practices, right? I mean, there's some limitations there to it. So in order to, we've actually, you know, we've spoken, I mean, a union could opt out. I mean, I think it would have to go to a town vote for a town hall vote for us to opt out of civil service. So, but generally though, I think that there's additional benefits, I think, to the members. They also have a sort of internal sort of grievance procedure with civil service that they can go, that they have access to firefighters or police if they feel that they need it. Not that they would use that often. I mean, they have their internal union grievance process. But anyways, I think that I think firefighters and police officers are probably, you know, not particularly inclined to drop it. So, you know, so I think we see this for the foreseeable future. Some towns have opted out, but it's a process to go with the union and the town to go through that.
There was, Mr. Clark, there was a police officer, I believe, I don't know if he was substituting or what have you, but there was at least one minority police officer, male, that I saw on the force that left and went somewhere else. I can't remember where. But was the same process used to find this person?
I believe so. I don't know if you know the specific case, Mandy, but I assume that he
I
did.
do. Yeah. So the same, like we would pull a list if if we were hiring 3 people, we would pull a list and we would get 9 names. And so that person, just topped the test and, was able to get a position. I will say, I think the person that you're talking about left because he was going to make more money in a different town.
Okay.
And so that's tough, you know, that's a tough, can't fault him.
And
Yeah.
then if someone's given those priorities, you know, there are, you know, the kinship, if they, you know, if they're a child of an officer who's killed in line of duty, something like that, they have that choice, so they can go to any town that they want in the entire state, right? And so some of the other priorities give them, you know, real
And-
choices with it. They can almost shop around, right?
Right, and so civil service, so once you're in civil service, so you can, it's called lateraling, and so I think the officer that you're speaking of, that's what he did. You know, he was approached by a bigger department that could pay him more money, and so he went.
Miss Risha, do you have a
Oh,
question?
yes. Thank you, Mandy. That was super helpful. Thank you for that. And Bob. So the list of preferences you mentioned, is that set by the state, or do specific towns, like, can we add preferences? No, so it's just set.
It's set by the state.
Okay. And do you know and maybe we don't know this, but with the current efforts for police reform, if that would be up for discussion across the Commonwealth or not?
I don't know the answer to that. I know for certain, you know, Bob and I have spoken about this, you know, well before this. It's tough to get people, you know, on both sides to take, you know, the police exam and the fire exam. They don't, you know, they don't seem to, we're not getting the people that have taken it before. Like, it was when I took it 17 years ago, I was fighting with 10 other people for one job, and I got a 98. And so now, you know, we're certainly we're exhausting our lists for sure. And still not, you know, getting enough people.
And I guess I have related questions too, and maybe you don't know the answers to these, because I think given everything that's out there now and I don't know the content of the tests, but everything that's out there on standardized tests and them essentially not being set up equitably, especially in the preparation for this, it just sets up people who may not have the means to take them or the training, et cetera, to not do as well as others. Just a flag that maybe that should be under consideration, or even the fee that might be prohibitive. So I don't know if that's something, as we look in the Situate budget, is there a set aside in the budget where we could help subsidize the cost of the test for Situate residents of color or women or LGBTQ plus, anyone who's underrepresented in the Situate fire police departments? And then the only other comment I wanted to make was, you mentioned like the Corey check and then Situate running its own extensive background check. Also, given everything that's happening with the cannabis industry, if those things pop up on somebody's background check now that it is legal in Massachusetts, and we know that a lot of people still in prison for a lot of these offenses are Black and brown people, if those pop up, just in terms of, you know, what that looks like for the town and how we review.
So I think, you know, Bob can probably speak better to this, but we've definitely, you know, like I said, this is ever evolving. And so I think there would be things that would preclude people, you know, 20 years ago. That certainly is not the case now. We're doing a better job, I think, of getting like the bigger picture of who our candidates are and are realistic about, you know, even crimes that happened, you know, when they were juveniles compared to, you know, a crime that had just happened, you know, a year before you put in for the police or fire exam.
Yeah, and then, you know, particularly with the Corey reform from a few years back, that's actually, I think, helped to kind of give people who may have a bit of a history a little better of a chance. But the other thing is, even when we go through our process, there's nothing that like entirely sort of dictates how we interpret those queries. So we have a lot of latitude, and a lot of times what will happen is that may even come up in the conversations with the individuals. So you give them an opportunity to explain kind of, you know, okay, so what were the circumstances? Can you explain what's happening here? And I think that particularly, if the person looks like a great candidate in many other regards. We have a lot of latitude with sort of excusing certain things. And the other thing, and I think, and I've talked about it, I do virtually all the recruitment for the town of Situate. And one of the things that I've been really struck with, I mean, I've been here for 3 years, and I've been really struck with how many good jobs there are in the town. And honestly, and I've said this to other managers, is that I'm not sure that Situate residents even understand that. I mean, if you want to go to work in the water plant and you get a couple of certifications, after a few years, you can do really well here. You can, with just a high school diploma, you can do well. And the other thing that I've talked to even Chief Thompson about is the idea of again, like Mandy said, one of the priorities is Situate residency. So if we were able to find a way to reach out to those communities that we want to reach out to, in the local communities, and if there's a Situate resident who's interested in becoming a firefighter or a police officer, they're going to go right to the top of that list because they live in Situate. As long as they can pass that test. So I think that's probably, again, I know when we get to the goals of the committee, for me anyways, that may be one of the priorities is how do we reach, a lot of what we need to do is recruit better, I think. And how do we reach those communities, and what help can we get from this committee to be able to do that? So, so that's a, point, you're right on point with that. I mean, I think we need to find a way to include those local committees that are communities that are.
Thank you both. That's helpful.
Can I just ask Mandy a question?
Mhm.
You said that you exhaust the lists now. I'm assuming there's some sort of cutoff point for which you have failed the test and we don't get those people. Okay.
Don't get those people. So you have to
Okay.
pass it. And so a passing score is 70. And like I said,
Okay.
the majority of people are here, we're fighting each other with a 98. So, I feel blessed that we, have like Bob will sit in our interviews and our candidates, like we're lucky. We're really lucky at the caliber of people that we're getting.
Okay. I just want to make sure what the low threshold was on that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes.
Mandy and Bob, when you take the three, the top three, the top four, or whatever from that list, are they then just exclusive to the Situate process, or are those top three names shared with any town that has open positions at the same time?
So as a resident, without any of those other factors, like, you having a parent that died in the line of duty, or, you being a disabled vet, or someone who had already been a police officer that had been laid off, then it strictly just goes to residents. And so you get, so when I took the test, you pick 3 towns. And so if we exhaust our list and someone from Hull has put down Situate, then they would be next on our list. And so.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lieutenant O'Shea and Mr. Clark. That was very informative. And we may have additional questions from you after the next part of our agenda, which is actually not the direct next part. It's review of the charge and discussion of committee goals. So in order to organize ourselves in a reasonable way, we need to have some goals, and from those goals we'll determine how we kind of attack our task, divide it up, how we'll be reporting. So I wanted to open it up to the committee for some amount of time to discuss goals, large kind of overreaching goals, which I think the charge kind of talks a little bit about, but also maybe even some more specific goals. So I want us to brainstorm a little bit, but talk in terms of the charge and so the charge is not, part of the charge is not very specific, but there are parts that I feel we could get a bit more specific on. So I'm going to open it up for discussion to everyone on the committee to kind of tell me what your thoughts are in terms of goals. And then after, a few minutes, we'll take some comments from the audience. So please raise your hand if you'd like to contribute to what you think some of our goals should be. And I'll also ask the audience members, when you tell us what you think some of the goals should be, that you also say whether or not you'd be willing to volunteer to help us in any of the subcommittees we produce or on any of the kind of work that we have to do to get all this done. So let's start with the committee people first. Anyone want to speak up about goals in general, goals they have?
Nikki,
Nikki, I'll start.
oh, go ahead.
Who?
No,
Wait,
go right-
Well, one of the,
Go ahead, Angela. Yes.
I know one of the things you and I talked about is, I think the charge is wonderful, but we have to talk to the residents. So, wanting Situate to be, equitable and inclusive, I think we need to talk to the residents to help us understand what they want. So, how do we go about doing that? One of the things, I know the school does a good job reaching out to the families and doing surveys. Is that something that we could do as a committee? Could we reach out? Could we put together a small survey to solicit feedback to the residents? I don't know if that's a question that we have to ask to the Board of Selectmen, but I just think we need to get, as much information. We all may have our own perception of, we have our own experiences growing up in the town, but we want to, if we're going to recommend any changes, or we need to know what the town is doing now and the perception of the residents, and then make, help, make changes if needed. So that was one of the questions. Can we do a survey? How do we, get information from the residents?
So the answer is yes, we can do a survey, both of the residents and of the people who work in the different departments and on the different committees of the town. I think we'd have to think and talk about what we're going to ask in the survey and how to collect it or how to get the answers back, whether it's going to be a link in our agenda minutes, or if it's going to be sent out, or if we're going to have one place people can go and do a Survey Monkey to help us out. We'd have to think about that process, but the short answer is yes, we can do a survey. Thank you, Angela. Ms. Harriman?
Again, I think like Angela, I'm wondering about the scope of what can be done. I understand the charge and I wonder about the scope. And one of the things I think I said to you in an email, Nikki, is, or asked if there would be an option. And I had talked with Bob Clark at some point about resources for trainings. And in the spirit of everyone comes to this starting in a different place, I think that it's one thing to work with departments and look at documents, but another altogether to work with folks about why this is happening. And just like Celia so eloquently talked about the structures of the civil service program, really, that are could be considered inherently biased. helping people who might not readily understand that, why that is so. And as I think I said in my email, sort of helping people to do the work from the inside out and the outside in, and wondering if there are some resources available for that. There's a training going on at my place of employment now. I'm not signed up, my department's not signed up until early February, but those who have taken it, and it's an online training, have said it's extraordinary and better than many they've taken before, and really sort of gets at some of the nuanced pieces of unconscious bias. So that was really what I was curious about. And then how big can that get? And are there ways to have bigger conversations in the community about these matters too? I think some of the things that played out in this town and the recent heated political climate were very difficult. And how do we begin to have some of those conversations too? And maybe I'm getting beyond the scope, so forgive me if I am.
No, you're not at all. So our charge is recommendations to the select board.
Mhm.
So in our recommendations, we can say that this is one of the things that we would suggest for sure. And if we formulate it as a goal, it could be to research resources for these types of training, for facilitation of these kinds of conversations, so that, that could be a goal. What I will say is this, that I don't want us to get too far away from being a committee whose central focus is the support and uplifting of the voices of those that are underrepresented here. I understand the idea that if you can kind of bring other people to the table, that'll create a better environment, and a better environment means that underrepresented people feel safer and happier here. I understand that. I definitely get that. So I guess one of the things that I'm working through is kind of the direct assistance to underrepresented people versus the kind of broader sweep of the whole community. So I do think trainings are helpful, particularly because most of the people and departments that we will be analyzing, if not all, are not run by people of color or those that are underrepresented. So, so yes, you've given us a lot to think about. We can recommend trainings for sure, and we can give information about the training that you suggested in particular. And that can be one of our goals as we move forward, for sure.
And I'm certainly no expert on what training would be ideal. I was just throwing that out as one example, but I think as we're working with these departments, and again, I'll go back to the example of Celia, and just, I think we're all, I think, being called appropriately so, and much too late, to really not only make these shifts in policy, but really look into the nitty-gritty of how these structures exist and how do we dismantle them. And they're wide and deep. And so I know it's just one step at a time, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Nikki, if I can just
Yes,
piggyback
go right ahead.
Kim's point there, I think we need what Kim said and Angela said, and I think it needs to be a holistic approach, because if we're trying to get more diverse residents so we can recruit from them to staff town departments, but no one wants to come because they don't feel like they belong, because we don't have conversations in our community about these issues, then it does impact the structural issues with the town. So I think what Kim was saying was not limited to trainings, but I think convenings or conversations. So like Situate is known for its St. Patrick's Day parade, right?
Right.
It could be known for many other things and celebrations of a multitude of cultures and ethnicities. We could also have convenings for Pride Month. We could have conversations about how to talk about racism with your family or with your employee. Like we could have those conversations too with residents, and we can make those recommendations and put resources towards them. So I think that's one set. The training is a different set. And I think that Kim isn't more so meaning, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kim, that would be more for town employees, because you can't just create a training for the whole town.
For the whole town, no.
Yeah, no. And there's also plenty of lists, like the Boston Foundation has a list of people who conduct these trainings, majority minority business enterprise certified, that we could turn to, so we don't have to scour resources.
Right.
But then I think the third sort of bucket or leg of the stool, Nikki, is then it's like getting into the structure, the policies, processes, budget. But I think it's we need to make recommendations, I think, about all of those things if the town is supposed to be equitable, if that makes sense.
So would you say, and this is for everyone, would you say that, how would we phrase that in the form of a goal? So is the goal to blank? How would we phrase what, I mean, so let me just repeat what I hear you guys saying. One is a conversation in the community about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And two is trainings for town officials and people working with and for the town. So how can we phrase that or those things in the form of a goal?
So I think could be broken down by stakeholder, if you want to look at it that way, because different stakeholders will need a different maybe approach.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not thinking about this the right way, but.
Well, okay, so maybe I'm not being clear. So when, yep, go ahead.
I think what we need is like Celia was saying, that 3-prong approach. And I think that we can make a goal based on that. Like, you know, one goal is how we have these discussions with Situate at large, basically every resident in Situate, hopefully. That's not going to be a training. We're going to have to do multiple conversations and multiple different ways of having that learning and conversation of where we're coming from and where we're starting from and how we can be more welcoming as a community. So we can move on to goal 2, right, of hiring more people. So we can move on to goal 3. And, you know, I think that's kind of like, we need all of it. And we need to be working on all of it at once, but we definitely need that community, that larger community piece. Because I was really struck, Celia, by what you said at the last meeting about how your friends didn't want to move here because we're also white. And I think that's a really important thing to hear and to hold that as something that we need to work on, that we need to work on ourselves to be a welcoming community. Because we can go out and make whatever policies we want and, you know, hire a whole bunch of minority people, but if they don't feel welcome when they come here, they're going to stay 6 months, a year, whatever, and they're going to go again. And we're going to be right back where we were. So I think in terms of a goal, I mean, just starting with that, conversations within the community can be a goal.
Conversations. Oh, that's one goal. I like it. How about goals related to getting the work of review of the policy, was it policy, procedures, and budgets?
Well, I think that kind of is the goal, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the goal.
Reviewing policy, procedures, and budgets.
That's a goal, and we form a subcommittee and we get after it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's solid. I think that's solid.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
If we're reviewing these policies, procedures, and budgets, Again, I think we need to be a little more specific on why we're reviewing them. For instance, to increase BIPOC, which I think is again another acronym that people use a lot, and I don't know if everybody knows it, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So to increase BIPOC representation in town positions, including administrative positions. So I mean, why are we doing this? Because we want more people, including administration people. Another one is to include further diversity in Situate. What are things that town can do? I've had a lot of people give me a lot of suggestions, and I don't want to bring up all the suggestions right now because I really do want us to think about our goals, but things like surveys to find out things that we could do within our town to make Situate recreation more inviting to people of color. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be hit within that. So when we're doing our policies and procedures, I wish we could be a little more specific on what we're doing with them, because I think we need a bit more guidance on that.
I agree. So let me ask this question and then we should move on because it's 8 o'clock. Is it enough, like Tom said, to use the words in the charge, policy, procedures, and budgets as a goal? So my vision is that there's two goals for this committee. One is figuring out a way to engage the community in such a way that we can change the atmosphere in the town. And the second is to complete a review of the town's policy, procedures, and budgets in each and every department to see where we can make improvements and train those who need it on the value of equity and inclusion. One of the things that Tom, Ruth, and I talked about was kind of a broader goal of, I think Ruth, you had it in you had a nice little list. And one of the things you said was, I actually may have even been similar to what the charge says, was to eradicate, these forces in town that continue to limit the experience of underrepresented people in town. I'm paraphrasing, but I think there was like a broad goal of that. So to me, it seems like one goal is community engagement to increase and educate the community on issues of equity, diversity, equity, inclusion. Offering or identifying training of those who work with and for Situate on issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and also analyzing the policies, policies, procedures, and budgets of every department, which is part of the charge as well. So there's 3. I'm not saying that's all, but it is I think it's a good beginning. And I think as we get into things, our goals may be added to or changed or, fleshed out. So let's stop there because it's 8 o'clock on goals. I do want to try and get to some of the other things we have here. One, I would suggest that I learned today from a conversation with select person Curran that there is a resource officer at the school level, and there's also a Detective Kirkland who is a civil rights officer. So I want to get in a little, actually, first, I'm sorry, let me back up. I'm jumping around. let's take about 10 minutes to hear from the public on the goals of the committee. I don't see any hands, but I'll see if anyone wants to contribute before we move on. I know it's kind of a long meeting. You can also contact any of us to discuss any of this at any time as well, but if there's anyone who wants to make a comment on this before we get into the remainder, let me know. Okay, I don't see any hands. So, did someone let in Select Person Canfield? I just saw her.
She is now in the room as a co-host, yes.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you. All right, so let's get into it then. One of the things I wanted to talk about tonight is the creation of subcommittee / task force on hate crimes and human rights, and possibly a youth committee, because I think a lot of the youth in town have done a wonderful job of expressing themselves, some in not as positive ways as others, but they have something to say, whether it be acceptable or not. And I think a youth committee or task force or whatever would be wonderful, and I think it should be led by youth. And then a human rights task force, which would include a subcommittee as well that would address specifically approaches to addressing hate crimes, addressing civil rights violations, and some recommendations directly from the governor for the entire state. So I've asked Stephanie Burke, who has done, who's done extensive research on all of this, to share with us what she's found. And then I'd like us to have some conversation and perhaps vote on creating those two subcommittees. So Stephanie, are you ready? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi. Hello. So thanks. My name's Stephanie. I have done a lot of research. I don't know about a committee, to be honest, for this task force things. This is just actually, there's already a committee in place, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this. But in 2017, Governor Baker reinstituted the hate crimes task force. He did it in response to the growing number of hate crimes in Massachusetts. It was something that was defunded and dormant since 2003. So in 2008, so part of the hate crimes task force, the last couple of years, they've made recommendations to our education system, to our schools, and to police departments. Charlie Baker has stated that part of the recommendations he's made to the police department are to promote full and effective cooperation and coordination among law enforcement agencies and communities affected by hate crimes to improve prevention, investigation, and prosecution of hate crimes. What they found was that not only were the numbers increasing, but there were several communities within Massachusetts that reported 0 hate crimes. So what that said to them was that people were categorizing or choosing to report hate crimes differently. One FBI agent who, was the former civil rights program in Bureau of Civil Rights program in Boston, said, there's always hate somewhere, and it's going to manifest itself into something. If they're not seeing it, it's a problem. So some of the recommendations to the police departments were to basically kind of lower the standard to what would be considered a hate crime, or how it would be reported and treated as a hate crime. And a lot of people have been using any incidences based in bias. And I think that's a huge important distinction. So Situate has actually been pretty good. It has been great in checking off the boxes of the hate crimes task force recommendations. A lot of towns didn't even bother to respond to the inquiries being made. Some towns said that it wasn't relevant to them. Situate did designate a civil rights officer, and they have began implementing some of their task force requirements. And if you want, I can share my screen with these requirements. I can also send them out later. But basically, what we've found is that through asking other departments and other people in the area is that a lot of people have designated civil rights officers. Some have gone to training, some haven't. Insurance agencies have actually offered training to the civil rights officers after these recommendations were made. And what we've found and what we would like to recommend on top of the recommendations, because as I said, Situate's actually been doing a really good job of checking off the boxes and doing is just going a bit further. There's a couple of recommendations that involve community programming and forums, so to speak. And we think that one of the largest problems is the lack of education surrounding hate crimes and any incident based in bias. The ultimate goal of these recommendations by the task force are prevention, persecution, but also to assist in the recovery for victims, which I think is huge. So I think that what we would, so I don't know if you guys saw, but Hingham, the interim chief of police of Hingham, actually, once it was brought to the attention that their civil rights officer, who they designated one to, there's no accessibility to it on the website. And I think that's something that Situate is lacking as well. I think a lot of people that are actually going to fall victim to any incident based in bias won't necessarily go to report it. So I think the more accessibility that we have on our website to our civil rights officer, including a phone number, a way to contact, I think that can help as well. We anything to a statement acknowledging the urgency in addressing hate crimes and hate crime education to stem retaliation and urge victims to come forward. Those are kind of some of the recommendations that have been discussed as well. We just want to make sure that people are devoted to the prevention and intervention of these crimes. We're not going to know that there's an issue until after it happens. And we just want to make sure we're prepared. And that's what basically the task force was created for as well. So what we're hoping that the DEI committee will do is look at the recommendations, ask that Situate PD adopt them all, and make a statement that these are a priority to speak to the people of color, to LGBTQIA+, especially following the events of the previous weeks. I think it's important to people to know that they're going to have safety and support. But aside from that, really taking the education aspects of the recommendations and being a leader in the community. I think the Situate Police Department did a great job community policing and doing the workouts at the high school beginning of this fall and earlier this summer. And I think there are a lot of great things that they are doing, but if we can use our work with our police department to help better educate people when it comes to hate crimes and any incidents based in bias, I think it'll help create a more safe and supportive environment for people who are feeling threatened right now. Because I can't, without getting into too many details, I know there are people in this community right now that don't feel safe. And I think that some of the priority, especially of the DEI committee right now, should be addressing things that we can do to provide more safety and support. The other thing about these recommendations are, it's not like these are a citizen's petition. These are not potential reform ideas. These are recommendations that were handed down from a publicly funded entity that are based on research and based in, with a goal in mind. So I'm hoping that this is something that you can look at and work to push people to adopt.
Okay, awesome. Stephanie, can you provide us with that list of recommendations?
Yeah.
I'd like to add that to the list of future agenda items, which is approving sending them. At this point, everyone hasn't seen them. So everyone needs to see them. And then we need to have further discussion. Does anyone else have questions for Stephanie?
I have a quick question. So in the notes that you're going to send over, do you have the name of the entity that funded this? You mentioned it was a publicly funded entity.
Oh, it's the state. It's Governor Baker's task force. He
Was the actual
funded
state?
it. Yeah,
Okay.
in 2017.
Okay. And do we have, you mentioned Hingham has adopted this. We can probably find that information.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that Hingham's fully adopted it. Situate is actually further along in adopting a lot of the recommendations. Again,
Right.
it's just about, I think the biggest, and I'll send this over in the notes, is the biggest thing is the transparency of the work that they're doing. Because again, I think when you're looking at being, you know, a minority within this community, whether it's gender or, you know, religion or race, just there are things that we can be doing from a leadership perspective that will show that you're welcome here and we support you. And if, you know, we want you to feel welcome and safe and supported. And I think that, again, it's already being done in the police department. I think just the transparency and the accessibility to it is important. I think that if we can move towards a see something, say something attitude, I think that'll also help in the future prevention of hate crimes.
Yeah, I mean, you say, I mean, I wrote it down in quotes, people in this community don't feel safe.
Yeah.
We need to fix that.
And I think a lot of some things happen, you know, where basically, again, it's the education side of it. If we can get a better education, a better understanding of some of the incidents that happen, you know, there are things that are happening all over the state right now. And again, it's just about us being prepared.
Right.
Yeah, I think too, if when we discuss it at the next meeting and ask the select board to take a look at it as well, I think if there is a push to adopt these recommendations in some sort of formal way, even though we're already doing some of them, I think publicizing that the Situate DEI committee is reviewing recommendations from the governor's task force for whatever, and have made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen is in their review of the recommendations from the, I mean, you can't say this information enough.
Yeah.
And so I think it makes a difference. I thank you so much for sending that over, Stephanie. We definitely are going to be talking about it with each other before the next meeting, but definitely at the next meeting.
If I could just, sorry, one note, the
right
thing
ahead.
with Hingham that Hingham did is they did make a statement reintroducing their civil rights officer, saying we do have a civil rights officer. This is their name. This is his name. This is his. We've set up a direct line to him, which wasn't done before, but it happened a couple weeks ago. So a direct line to this officer where he can be reached. And you know, something like that is just, it's a lot easier because right now it's challenging to go on any town's website within the South Shore and try and find that information.
So Lieutenant O'Shea, is that something Detective Kirkland would be willing to do, is to place his name, civil rights officer, his contact information on the Situate website?
Yep. So
under
it's,
safety or whatever?
just for clarity, it's Detective Owen Kirkbride. And so these recommendations were from 2018, and that's when he became the civil rights officer. And that's when we had, you know, adopted our new policy. So Stephanie, there is a way now on our website to report any crime. And you can do that, you know, anonymously. So are you asking that there's just something specific?
So,
that,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I'm not missing what your point would.
Yeah, I think what she's saying is that it's labeled specifically civil rights officer. And I mean, I would go further to say pursuant to Governor Baker's hate crimes task force, et cetera, we could work on the language with you if you'd
Yeah, I
like.
mean, I think whatever.
If I could just interrupt, so if you go to a website and there's like citizens resources, there's a whole, subsection for like the school resource officer that you could easily click on and find information about, and to have that same sort of accessibility. But then the other side of the recommendations was a public directory of any incidences based in bias, and you can't, that's challenging to find as well. So, I mean, again, it's up for discussion and at your discretion, but a section that is easily accessible to find, as it is like any of the other resources if you're reporting something else, perhaps a discrimination section, a civil rights officer section, where it would also have resources discussing the hate crime recommendations, or what a hate crime is, or educational resources, and a little bit more of an extensive knowledge as to where people can find, the hate crimes that have occurred, or what's happened, because the public directory was another recommendation. So I don't know how. I don't want to say we want this exactly lined out like that, but just basically
It
within
sounds like a police blotter on what's occurred and when and like where. So you're not necessarily, because there's children involved in the latest thing.
Right, and so, and we're bound by public records law.
Yeah, so, but a brief, because you want, I think what is the focus is to have it announced that this has happened here on this date, and that the civil rights officer and the resource officer are participating in it, in addressing the issue, and how to contact that person directly. Civil rights officer might not be fully understood by everyone, right? So civil rights officer, please contact Detective Kirkland if you or someone has experienced, I think bringing it to be kind of easier to find and more defined.
And if I can interject too, so if you go to the Citizens Resources page on the Situate website, and there's information on other things, like if you're curious, if you just weren't even sure if something that you just experienced was something that you should call on, or you had a question, or you saw something somewhat suspicious, to be able to have that accessibility instead of trying to search through, or then like Google what is a hate crime, and to have a better resource for information. So there's less, either there's a less of a path for you to have to cross to get to that. So you're like, forget it, it's not worth it. But B, for somebody else who maybe saw something or was curious or wants to know, just to have that information more easily accessible, so someone can have those answers questioned, because I think a lot of people are confused about what rights are, or if somebody just scream some bigotries at me, is that something I should be
Does that
calling
count?
in?
Yeah, what counts and what doesn't? Can we ask Lieutenant O'Shea, can we ask if Detective Kirkland can join us at the next meeting? Is that possible? Can we at least ask?
Absolutely.
Could you ask?
Yeah,
if he would mind joining us?
Owen Kirkbride.
Kirkbride, what am I saying? Kirkland?
Yes.
I was thinking of my BJ's order, maybe, I don't know.
And if I could just
Nikki, may I also just make a
right
suggestion to move things along a little bit for you? Maybe Mandy can also go back to Chief Thompson and just share, I think it's a great opportunity for us to increase exposure and definitions, and she can come back to us with their proposal of what they can amend on the site, so it can move a little bit quicker, because it's just such a no-brainer to get that information out there for folks to have. But I think it'd be nice if Mandy and Chief can discuss and come back with something for all of you to take a look at and see if it meets your goals.
Again, Situate is doing actually a really great job compared to some other, South Shore departments. It's just being able to have that information more easily accessible for people.
That's a great idea.
So
thanks, Stephanie.
Would it stand to reason, excuse me, that there's also protocols if these reports are made? And do those need to be posted as well? So people know, if I'm making this report, this is what will happen to it, and what are the privacy protocols and whatnot around these things?
So so they have the list of recommendations, and then the last recommendation is where it gets a little bit, and where a lot of the departments have fallen off, is that they refer to the International Association of Chief of Police model policy. And actually Situate has also done a great job referring to that on some of their policies. But it's just, that's when it gets further into the meeting with neighborhood groups, and, engaging with the media, working with the community, and starts to go into some of those more detailed ideas and how reporting should be handled. So, I mean, if there were other suggestions, I think that it could be, the civil rights officer, the civil rights officer was listed and you had more information, it's something that you could discuss, or you had an experience. I think it's something that then lends itself to that as well. You can then go back and say, from my experience, this is what I encountered, and I just want to talk. The idea of the civil rights officer is that it's the same person that's handling all these. So then you can grow and you can get a better system that works well and, is more effective for your community. So it's just the repetitive nature itself, and the civil rights officer is also supposed to allow for growing of, how you work with your community.
Awesome. Stephanie, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Please send the recommendations to me or to Ruth so that we can add them, one, to the minutes, and all of us can also take a look at them. If we wouldn't mind inviting the detective to the next meeting that we have, that would be fantastic. So they can work through specifics. But if there's anything at all that you can do to adjust the website between now and the next meeting in 2 weeks, that would be fantastic. I also, so there's two things kind of left to do here. One is subcommittees. So can we take a vote on the creation, and we can talk about, and I'd like to add to future agenda what we want them to do, but can we take a vote on creating the two subcommittees, one, a youth subcommittee, and two, a human rights subcommittee? Can we have some discussion and a vote? I wouldn't imagine there would be too much against creating those. Does anyone want to make the motion?
Clarification, we didn't really talk about either of those with Ms. Burke's report. So are you asking?
Yeah, let's chat about that now and see what people think about it, and we can work on defining it more tightly at our next meeting. So what do we think about having those two subcommittees?
Do they have any goals?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what's the purpose, Nikki, of each?
Well, one is to take the pulse of what the youth in our community are talking about in terms of these issues and what their concerns are, and maybe even take some suggestions on how to approach them. So that's really the youth committee. And then the human rights committee is what that's basically clear, to ensure that things like the civil rights officer, the resource officer, and any other incidents that occur that are addressed, and maybe keep a log of those incidences. And also, I would like them to work on helping us with solutions focused on people's civil rights in particular.
I have a quick.
Yep.
So is it my understanding that the school already has a committee right now?
I don't know.
I just don't want to be duplicitous.
They do.
They have what?
Yeah,
what do
they
have?
do.
I'm gonna have to dig it up, but
I think this, I might be misspoken, but I filled in for the school resource officer in one meeting, and it sounds like they're doing exactly something very, very similar to what we're doing.
there's an anti-racism committee, I believe is what it's called. And I'm just looking up in Dr. McGuire's most recent email because there was another incident.
So but our job is to make recommendations to the select board. And that committee's job is what?
To make recommendations, I thought, to the school board.
There's a
Right.
club, there's an anti-racism club. is
Okay,
what
so that's
was-
different than a committee that makes recommendations to
There's
elected
also,
officials.
there's also a school committee subcommittee that works on diversity. It's not just a club.
Right. Yeah, I think that the kids are in the club.
Would it make more sense to
That
have
makes
a liaison rather than duplicate efforts?
I think that's a good idea.
Between the two
Okay. So
I think that's a good
does
idea.
anyone want to take the lead on getting us a youth liaison from that? I don't have any high schoolers, but to kind of
can
let
do
us
it.
know. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tom. And then for the Human Rights Committee, how do we feel about that?
My question is, does the Human Rights Committee have certain, I mean, is this a kind of a standardized thing that human rights committees do certain things and have certain powers? Because I don't think it's just a subcommittee of us, because I don't really know that. I mean, that's kind of what we're going to be doing, is looking things up and understanding what's going on in the town as per
Well,
that.
right, I understand, but I think a Human Rights Committee is more, we're focused on kind of institutional equality, right? And I feel like a Human Rights Committee is focused more on the insurance that there aren't any violations of people's human rights and preventing of that. So,
But is that beyond the scope of the charge, Nikki?
I don't know. I mean, what is your opinion? I feel like
I think you have a lot to chew on
Yeah.
as a committee.
Yeah.
And you were all going down the right road at the beginning with your nice, everything that Celia said, Angela said, you all seem to start to create your framework. And I think and this is only my opinion, and you guys are the voters, but I think if you start going sideways into a whole nother area, it's going to detract from really being effective in those core areas that you talked about at the beginning of your meeting. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so I think that we can table that as well. Let's table that for another time, because I do want to get into assigning departments and finally adjourning, but because it is late. But I do want us to think about what a Human Rights Committee would look like, a subcommittee would look like, and what it would do. Because I do think that some of the things that are happening in the volume that they're happening may be indicative of other things that we may be able to stop, turn around, or at least deter. So it's a little different than civil rights, human rights, but they're in the same kind of area. So let's table it for discussion at another time. So what I want to skip to now, I think I can. Have we check? Yes, assignment of departments for other business. This should be quick. So if I've spoken, or I've received emails and gone back and forth with you, if you could pull up the organizational chart that Maura sent us in an email, Town of Situate overview email. There's a PDF that has an organizational chart. And so I'd like us to divvy things up. There are 7 of us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but there are kind of 8 things. So based on what I've heard, here's what I know almost for sure. I know that Ms. Harriman would like to be involved in the kind of vertical stream of Health and Human Services, the Council on Aging, and Veteran Services. That whole string there, I feel like that's where you'd like to be involved. Is that right?
That would be great, unless there's somebody else, or I don't know how you're doing this, if you're doing, if everybody's taking a.
So my idea was that we need to collect information first.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into kind of analyzing what we receive back.
Mhm.
So we
Can I
need to
clarify, Nikki, what information are we collecting?
we're collecting information. Well, we can talk about that, but I think we should assign people first.
Okay, as long as we get that part.
Yep. let's assign people first, and then we'll talk about what we can bring in terms of understanding it. Okay. So that I know.
Nikki, you're muted.
Nikki, we don't hear you. We lost you. You're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, so, where were we? We were here.
Last I have is Ms. Harriman with Health and Human Services, Veteran Services.
That's right.
And-
And then I know that Ms. Richa was talking about, doing procurement. So,
Yeah,
Is
so I
that-
guess, Nikki, my
Mhm.
question is, I know we're going like, whatever the term is, laterally across
Right.
departments, because we could do that laterally, or we could do the verticals, like hiring across all departments, procurement across all departments, because at the end of the day, whatever processes we have in place, we want to be adopted town-wide, so it's equitable. And what, like, we don't want one department to hire differently from another department. So I guess what I was saying in my email to you is, I don't know if I necessarily have a department I would choose. Maybe I could help more with the verticals,
okay,
but I'm happy to take whatever, like I can.
so
Pick any
right now we
department.
just need the information and we need people to get it. And we need to talk about what we're getting. So, let's see. Ruth, I feel like you're the public safety vertical. And that's a lot. So would anyone like to join Ruth with that?
I can help you, Ruth.
Thanks.
Okay, so Miss Richa and Miss Yassine, that's kind of your, I feel like the finance vertical is also more than one person, because it also includes, I think, the capital planning committee and the advisory committee. Does anyone want to stick their neck out for that? I'll do it with someone. That's helpful. Okay.
I'll do it with you, Nikki.
Can you
Okay.
give me a name? Because I can't see everybody right now, so. That's
Angela.
thank you.
Miss, yep. And then cultural, recreation, library. I feel like that's you, Tom.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And then we've got public works and facilities. I feel like they go hand in hand, and then we have planning. Natasha, Reverend Stewart, do you think the conservation, coastal resources and planning?
Sure.
Okay. And then what's left is facilities and public works. Any suggestions? It's a big,
Well, and Public Works probably hits your greatest amount of employees.
yeah, so that's a big
So-
one. So maybe two people on that string.
Yeah,
Let's see, I will do it, and will anyone join me with that?
Can I jump in?
Sure.
What exactly would we be doing in this process? You know,
We're asking questions to
mean-
gather information. That's the point that we're at, and we're gonna discuss the questions 8:30, so we can discuss the questions next week. But we need to assign people so that we know, I mean, my assignment would be to find out or to make contact with the heads of each of these departments. And ideally find out the 3 things to start off with. What was
Nikki?
it? Yes,
Might I suggest maybe what you do is for next week, well, in 2 weeks agenda, maybe everybody can come up with a list of questions they've thought of. So all of you are asking pretty much the same questions. So
yeah,
the data that you get back is consistent. So
Correct.
maybe if people submit questions to you and the board, and you can kind of review them and come up with a
The
common
same-
set for all to use, you'll
Right.
get a more consistent data back. Does that make
that makes
the
a
folks
lot
think
of
about
sense.
that?
And Ms. Sanders, if it's okay by you, if they send it to you and me, then I can include that in minutes when I send things out.
That's
So
great.
I could then disseminate that back to people. And again, that's that way we get the information in from everybody, and then we can
Right.
kind of put it back out. And then you'll see it beforehand, so you can then, everybody thinks about it before we start our meeting.
That's great. If that would definitely work. Thank you, both of you. So we have Public Works left. Is that going to be me alone?
Nikki, I can do, okay,
Yeah, I can hear you.
Nikki, I work in Public Works and I will do that with you.
Wonderful. Excellent. All right. Okay, so we have our marching orders for next week. Well, before next week and next week. We'll discuss those. We'll discuss the agenda. And the proposed future meeting dates. Has everyone reviewed those dates? They do include school vacation weeks. But we're on Zoom, so I assume if you are going away, you have a phone or a computer. Any comments about those dates? Do they work?
Yeah, they work. Nikki, I know you noticed you put a meeting on the books for next week. Is it next week or 2 weeks from now is the next meeting?
So that's my fault.
Oh, okay.
So
And then the
maybe
only
I got
other-
it wrong.
And
So everything should shift, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
2/9/23, so on.
Okay.
So then we
Yeah,
wouldn't
you
have
might-
school vacation weeks.
You
My
might
guess is-
too want to just look at the Board of Selectmen meetings. I know we
Yes,
were
'cause
trying
that's
to
what
do
I
them
went by.
opposite. And at
That's what I
some
went
point
by.
in April, they get a little nutty. It doesn't go every other week. So
Okay.
I can send you the list if you need to. It is on the town website. But if you just put in your calendars every other week, it doesn't necessarily work, because trust me, I've tried that with my work calendar.
Yeah, yeah.
So can we agree on the next meeting being which date? The 9th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for sure, Maura, there's not a committee, Board of Selectmen's meeting on the 9th?
I can tell you
one
there
sec,
is a
let me double
selectmen
check.
meeting on the 9th.
Yeah,
yes.
because
Hmm.
there was a reason I picked these dates, and obviously I may have started on the wrong time, but
Hmm.
Seth, what did you say? Do we have a meeting on the 9th? Is that what you
You
said?
do,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
that's, okay, so maybe we have to not do the 2nd and then start on the 16th, but that would be the next one after the Board of Selectmen's meeting, because I use the Board of Selectmen's, the select boards, I'm gonna have to train myself, board's calendar to set this up. It looks as though I just started a little too quickly, though. So if we eliminate the first meeting date, which was 2/2, I think that the rest of them are correct, because I did go from the select board's calendar.
So the 2/2 would now be,
Just, we have to go to 2/16.
that's a long time. Let me just ask, how many people can show next week? How many do we need? We need 5. How many do we have? One,
we need-
2.
I could do it. I can move stuff.
All right, so let's do it. Let's do it next week. And then can you get the dates straightened out for us?
Yeah, I will confirm these dates.
All right, so that means Tom and Ruth, we need to have a meeting.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. All right. We are at the end of our first meeting, folks. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I think Mandy has, she's either motioning or she has. a
Sorry,
question.
just before we motion to adjourn, Nikki, I
Yes.
can't guarantee that I can get Detective Kirkbride here for next week, just so everyone's clear.
Oh, right.
I have to see how his schedule falls, so.
Can you find that out
Yeah,
before
absolutely. I just don't
Friday
want-
morning?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want
Because we have
everyone
to
to think
put
it's
the
gonna be on the
agenda
agenda. I can't make any promises.
Okay,
Mandy, if
so-
you can also just let me know, because then I will, not put it on the agenda for it. If he's not available, we'll just hold that for another date.
Right, I sure will.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Okay. Anyone else? Anything else? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Your motion.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
We will adjourn.
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote. That's right. Thank you, Ruth. Here we go. Miss Dre,
Yes.
Miss Risha. Uh-oh, did she leave?
Nope. Yes. Did I
Okay,
freeze?
thanks. Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Yassine,
Yes.
Vice Chair,
Yes.
Miss Harriman. Where is she? Miss Harriman? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So the meeting is adjourned until February 2nd, 2021 at 6:30.